Welcome to A Life in Marketing. Today we're going to chat to Phil Treagus-Evans, who is both an agency boss and an author.
Phil has written a fantastic book called Human First Marketing, and his agency has also handled social media marketing for a range of international brands.
We're really excited to chat to Phil today about why he felt entrepreneurial from such an early age and what exactly human first marketing means.
Let's meet Phil.
Phil, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for giving up your time. I want to start by talking about the agency that you run called Giraffe Social. Would you mind telling us a bit about what Giraffe Social does?
Yeah, sure. So firstly, thanks for having me on. Giraffe Social has been around now for just over 13 years, and we are a specialist social media agency, meaning that we don't do everything. We just focus on social media. And that really involves the organic side, so content creation, community management, these sorts of things. But we also manage paid ads for our clients, and we also do influencer marketing as well. We work with all sorts of clients, as you can imagine. Over 13 years, we've worked with hundreds of different businesses in all different spaces. So we don't specialize in any particular industry. But of the last few years, we've been doing a lot more work in the sort of human first marketing world, as you'd imagine.
Great. And I've got to ask you about that name as well. I'm sure everyone asks you this, but where did the name Giraffe come from?
Basically, Kane is my business partner. We decided to start Giraffe almost as like a safe option. So we were actually starting another business, and it was wildly ambitious or naive. Either of those, I think, words would probably be accurate. And whilst we were doing it, we were using social media to market that business, and we realized we're quite good at this. Like, this is something that we've grown up with, and we were starting to be asked by friends and family, like, "Oh, could you do this for our business or for our band or these sorts of things?" So we agreed maybe we should start a safer Plan B style business, and that business was Giraffe. And we sat down in an afternoon and sort of looked at what was out there. And 13 years ago, there was nowhere near as many agencies as there are now. But they were all super boring. They all had really boring names. And we thought, how can we do this differently? So we decided to pick an animal. And we just sat there and went through the animal kingdom, sort of picking out the pros and cons of how does that relate to marketing? Is there any kind of tenuous link there that we can use? And thinking about the colors that might be sort of accompanying a brand name. And we opted for Giraffe because firstly, we like the brand colors of sort of oranges and blacks and whites. But also the giraffe's neck was quite a good symbol for getting reach. And at the time, that was a lot of what we were doing was helping businesses reach more people.
Where would you say that the ambition come from to not work for somebody else, but actually start your own business?
I think that the answer is probably books. So when I was about 14, 15, I started to read a lot of nonfiction. I sort of stumbled into it, reading lots of business books and reading things like Tim Ferriss and like Think and Grow Rich and all the sort of classic nonfiction books. And it really just opened my eyes to a different way of doing this, of doing my career. But yeah, the more I sort of looked into it, the more I found a passion for building things, creating things. The idea of creating something out of nothing is something that drives me still to this day. And entrepreneurialism sort of seemed like the obvious path. Although I would say that as a sort of 16, 17, 18-year-old, I think, and I don't know if this is still the case, but I was surrounded by a lot of, that's not really a proper job, and maybe you should do something a bit more conventional. And I did quite well at school, so I was being pushed into more conventional subjects and trying to do like maths and law and these sorts of things. And yeah, I just hated it. It didn't sort of vibe with me at all, and I ended up not doing very well at college. Took a year out to kind of figure out what I wanted to do. Went back, studied business and film. And then, sort of went from there really, and just wanted to start businesses. I remember saying to Kane early on that I just want to start as quickly as possible because I want to fail. I want to fail really quickly because I know that some of this isn't going to work. So the quicker we do that, with the less responsibilities and mortgage payments and all of the stuff that comes with being an adult is there. Like, let's start things and learn some things and see what works and see what doesn't. And I was quite fortunate, really, that the second business I started in Giraffe has been a really big success.
Right. What was the path from university to becoming an entrepreneur?
I met Kane working in a shop when I was 16. So it was the first job I ever had. Kane was a year older than I was, so he'd been there a year. And we worked there all the way through education, through college, through university. So over that time, Kane and I had lots of conversations about, one day we're going to do this and we're going to start that. And we had all these sort of aspirations. But we agreed that we would finish education before we started. And I think we ended up starting the first business sort of whilst I was still at university towards the end.
What gave you the, I guess, resilience, maybe in a way to, and pragmatism as well, in a way to think about, you're going to fail? Where would you say that, well, I guess pragmatism came from?
Yeah, I think books. We're surrounded by statistics of how many businesses fail, which can be really daunting when you're starting out. And I just knew that this was what I wanted to do, and I thought I'd rather start probably before I'm ready. And we weren't ready. Like, when we started the business, we had no idea what we were doing. I always joke that we started Giraffe, and I don't even know if we knew what the word agency meant at the time. We were just like, oh, we just do social media for businesses. That's what we do. So we really kind of fell into it.
I imagine over the years, what you've actually been able to offer to clients is quite different. So, just look at the evolution of social media in the time that you've been running an agency. I imagine the kind of things you were doing back then and the kind of things you're doing now are quite different because the technology's changed. Is that right?
Yeah, dramatically so. So when we started, there wasn't really even a lot of paid advertising on social at the time. So most of the work we did at the beginning was very organic, very much on Facebook and Twitter, which were the two platforms basically every client we worked with, we were looking after. And everything we did was organic. And to be fair, a lot of it was text-based as well. Like Twitter in the early days barely had any images on it. It was almost all text-based. And then the first big evolution was the paid ads. And, I think for us, that was a really key turning point for the business, because in the early days, the biggest struggle was that social media was, I think, more brand than performance because it was so organic. Whereas when paid ads started to really become more common, we suddenly had a way to drive sales and to measure what we were doing and really prove a return. So that was a real pivotal moment for the agency, because we started to grow our clients, with them and really being able to scale up what we offered. And then I would say in the last sort of 3 or 4 years, it's not pivoted is probably that's too strong a word, but with all of the human first stuff we're doing, where we're helping companies now start to think about employee advocacy or maybe executive comms, or making content with their team. We talk a lot about working with brands who have great culture and helping them turn the culture into content. But also on the customer side as well, and helping them understand their audience more. And also help them create content with their audience. So doing a lot more things like influencer marketing or UGC. Everything now that we do, we try and be a lot more people focused, as we feel like that's the competitive edge, I think, now with the rise of AI especially. And we're just seeing the best results for our clients. So yeah, that's kind of why we lent into it.
But how did you and Kane sort of educate yourself around paid ads if that wasn't something that wasn't there yet? Did you do courses? Did you just read up on it? How did you gather that expertise?
My advice to people is always just to start. I think a lot of people wait until they feel like they know everything and they're perfectly ready to do something, and they've read every book on it and they've taken every course on it. And I think sometimes in life you just have to start, because ultimately you end up learning a lot by doing and getting some things right and getting some things wrong. That's often one of the best ways to learn. So I always advise people to sort of, especially marketing students. Obviously we've hired lots of marketing students over the years, and there's some who join the company who haven't had any sort of career experience, and they're just bringing their sort of their educational experience, and they sometimes struggle. Whereas there's others who maybe they've got involved in societies in the university and helped manage their social, or their dad runs a business or their mum runs a business and they've helped them with their social. And that gap between sort of the education and the practical, I think sometimes that bridging that by just doing it and throwing yourself into it is one of the best things you can do.
I would imagine that getting things wrong, and particularly, if you're working towards targets for clients and hiring people, as you mentioned as well, it must have its stressful moments.
Yeah. Yes, to all of that. But as cheesy as it sounds, I always tried to see this as a privilege rather than pressure. Like we got to work with some amazing clients, and sometimes that was really scary because there was big targets and maybe we weren't as equipped as we should have been. I always remind our team that, we work in marketing. We're not dealing with people's lives here. Like, we're not doctors and surgeons, and, we're doing marketing. Like this. We need to keep it in perspective.
I think for adding to the stress is you've recently published your first book, which is quite incredible. Thinking about all the stuff you do as well, called Human First Marketing. Can you tell us a little bit about the title and about the book in general, please?
Sure. So the title of the book came about a few years before I actually started writing it, because we were doing a rebrand for Giraffe and really a repositioning as well. And as always, I was handling it myself, and I went really deep and was sort of reading lots of books on branding. And I'm fortunate enough to know people who run branding agencies, so I was picking their brains and trying to learn as much as I could. And as part of that process, I looked at hundreds of social media agencies to see, like, well, what are people doing? And the same thing kept coming up, and it was that every agency now seems to refer to itself as social first, which I think is great. I think it's a good approach, and we've got some partner agencies who take that approach. But I'd sort of realized that all of our most successful campaigns, the common thread was people, whether it was influencer marketing or having like a really founder-led sort of style business or employee advocacy. All of these things were the common thread of the most successful campaigns. And whilst I was doing that process, AI was just starting to like appear into the sort of common consciousness, if you like. So I sort of came up with this idea of, why don't we call ourselves Human First? And the book is almost a selfish endeavor, because it was a vehicle for me to organize all of this chaos in my mind into a framework and some structure, and also to challenge myself and say, well, I think this, but is there any evidence of that? Like, what's the psychology behind that? So a lot of the first half of the book is really more theory based and thinking about the psychology, sociology behind why things work and why they don't. So the title of the book really came out of that rebranding and repositioning that we did of Giraffe.
You said the reason for writing the book was almost, for your own benefit too. Is that the prompt for you to write the book, or what was sort of what made you think, oh, actually, I could write a whole book?
I'd always wanted to write a book. I mentioned earlier that I was a pretty voracious reader as a child. And I always have had ambitions of writing a book, but there's so many books that are written. So I've always been wary of starting anything like this, because I wanted it to feel original. I wanted it to have so much value that anyone who read it would feel like they've really got their money's worth of the book. And this was the first time I thought, you know what, this ticks all of the boxes. It's something that I think is original. It's something that I am passionate about, and I believe at my core about keeping humanity in marketing. And it was something that I wanted to dedicate a couple of years of my life researching, really just completely delving into and surrounding myself with. So it sort of felt like everything aligned, and it was almost like it wasn't a decision for me. This was what I needed to do. So there was never really a moment where I thought, I wonder if this could be a book. I just started writing. I was just like, this is the book. So yeah.
I love the book, Phil. I think it's great. What I really like about it as well, it's kind of a book of two halves, because the first half is about the principles, and I love how you sort of integrate psychology in there, which is obviously my key interest really. But then the second half is about how you might actually apply that and the things that you might actually do through your agency, or even if you're not working with your agency, tactics that marketers can employ. Um, so I wondered if you could talk us through the first half, maybe first, the four principles: people, authenticity, connection, and purpose. What did you mean by those words?
Yeah, so the sort of give you a peek behind the curtain, I started writing the book more on the practical side because naturally my experience is in the doing. So I sort of started there, but what I quickly realized was that a lot of the tactics and ideas in the practical side of the book, they only really work if the business is already positioned in the right way in terms of values and culture and beliefs. So I sort of doubled back and thought, you know what, I need to start actually with the principles of what underpins this, because without them, it will feel fake and it won't work. So yeah, the four principles of the human first marketing framework: people, authenticity, connection, and purpose. So people, it's pretty self-explanatory, but it's about making sure that we are keeping humanity and people at the forefront of our marketing strategies, and also accepting that people are messy and chaotic, and that we shouldn't be trying to sort of pigeonhole them too much. So keeping people at the front and center. Authenticity, which I think is one of those words that is said so often in marketing that you almost don't hear it anymore because it's just almost lost its meaning. But a lot of that comes from the pandemic. So during the pandemic, when everyone was stuck at home and the sort of quality of content had to suffer a little bit because we didn't have studios and actors and lighting, and so everything became a lot more raw, and everyone loved it, and we've kept doing it ever since. And so to me, that was the big indication that people want real, they want authentic. And I think with AI making everything feel, slightly inauthentic, I think it's even more the case now than when I was writing. Connection is reminding us that marketing, when it's done right, should be a two-way street. Like, if we're just broadcasting at people, I don't think that sort of marketing has longevity. I think we need to be looking at ways to build relationships and to prioritize things like advocacy over short-term sales, which, if anyone understands the struggle of that, it's me with running an agency, because I understand that everyone is under pressure, whether you're an agency or a marketing manager or a CMO. There's pressure to show results now, and what have we done? Have we generated sales? And advocacy can kind of seem like this distant, slightly hazy sort of idea, but it should be the long-term goal. And then purpose, it's kind of like two sides to purpose. So one is that I, at my core, believe that business and marketing can be a force for good. So I talk a lot in the book about having purpose of, why the business exists and how it contributes to people and communities and the planet. But the other side of purpose is, I suppose you could call this an elusive obvious, but just being intentional. I speak to so many brands as part of my job, and it's so common for people to say, we're doing marketing because it's what we've always done, or there's no real plan or sort of purpose behind what we're doing. We're just doing it because it's what we've always done. And sometimes our job as an agency is to kind of shake people and say, hey, why are we doing this? Like, is this doing anything? What's the goal here? So yeah, a big part of the principles of the book is also getting back to making sure that what we're doing is intentional.
What I really like about the book as well, it's not just you and your thoughts. It's not just, things that have popped into your head, because you give case studies. For example, I think you talk about Lego when it comes to authenticity, and you also refer to lots of academic studies. You talk about social proof, for example, when it comes to people. So did you sort of collect together lots of bits of information from different places before you wrote the book and then compile it into some kind of order? Or how did you go about making sure that there was something robust behind your ideas?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a mix. So a lot of the books and stuff that are quoted or referenced in the writing are books I've read in the past, and I've sort of retained some recollection of what they were saying when I read them. But I have to say that one of the big things with the book that was such a big help was I worked with a professional editor right at the end of it. Well, actually, there's two. So I worked with a professional editor, but I also had a cohort of early readers. So I built a collection of about 15 people who are either senior marketing people, agency founders, other authors, some friends, some colleagues. And they read as I was writing. So I'd write, I'd do a second draft, then it would go to them, and they would hopefully rip it apart and say, don't agree with this, or, what makes you think that, and really question me and challenge me. Which obviously was, for someone who's a delicate little flower like I am, that was challenging at the best of times, but I got used to it. And then with the professional editor, she really helped turn all of it into structured, content that was backed. So I owe a lot of gratitude to the people involved in that process.
It's really interesting to hear about the four principles. So if you had to give listeners some key advice on how to apply them, I know you've explained them sort of in better detail, but what would be the key things to remember?
I think the first point is to just start with people. Have a look at your marketing and see, are we showing real people? Are we showing our team? Are we treating our customers like data points, or are we actually speaking to them and treating them like humans? So firstly, really focusing in on people and understanding your customers as real people and figuring out their emotions and their context and what life is like for them. And then I would also look at things like connection. So when a brand comes to us and says, like, we want to improve our engagement on social media, I think they expect us to say, okay, well, we need to produce better content. But to be honest, the answer I usually give is, well, what engagement are you giving out? Are you going out into your industry and commenting on other people's posts, or, being on podcasts or providing value to people in that way? And usually the answer is no, they're not doing anything on that front. And, I have a silly analogy in the book about two people who are throwing a party, and, one is just spamming out like, yeah, we're going to have a party, we're going to have this, and there's going to be this, and the music's going to be great, and there's going to be all this food. Whereas across the street, there's another party where the guy who's doing it has spent the month before going to other people's parties and helping to make their parties a success. It's sort of the power of reciprocity, isn't it? It's putting it out there and it will come back. So I think those would maybe be the two big ones that I would give people advice on.
One of the things that gets me a bit frustrated sometimes talking to students or others is about sort of playing an algorithm all the time on social media, and if you include a picture, it will do much better, get more impressions, and if you do this. And I often have to stop and say, well, actually, there is going to be a real person who actually sees this content at the end. So yeah, you might get increased impressions for the first 5 minutes or whatever it might be, but actually you've got to remember that whatever you're doing to present yourself or present your brand is going to be seen by a real person. So think about the psychological effect, let alone the fact you might get a lot of clicks on it or a lot of likes or whatever the engagement metric might be. What's the long-term impression you're going to have? So I guess that also feeds into human first marketing, does it?
And I think that's human nature, I think, is to look for the magic bullets, the little quick wins that, if you crack the algorithm, you can achieve all these things. And the one bit of evidence that is needed to sort of debunk that, if you like, is that every social network is running thousands of different algorithms at once. There is no one algorithm. They are testing constantly. So the algorithm that you see, Tom, on your LinkedIn is going to be slightly different probably to the one running on mine. So dedicating yourself to try and cracking this like enigma code, it's just a waste of time, because it's going to change in a month's time anyway, and then it'll change again. And if you just focus on actually providing value and being a real person and forming actual relationships with people, that's going to sort of stand the test of time more than any sort of temporary algorithm that you're trying to figure out. So yeah, 100%.
Well, you seem to have been a bit on a journey as an entrepreneur and as an author as well. What are the lessons learned that you can share with other listeners?
How long have you got? I think what I said earlier stands true. It's just you have to just start. You have to just start doing things, and that's especially true as an entrepreneur because there's no book I've ever read about business that I'm like, oh yeah, if you read that, you'll know what to do, because until you're in it, it's just. And I think that's why I love it so much, is that I often refer to being an entrepreneur as like building a jigsaw puzzle, but without the picture. And it never finishes. You're just constantly sort of expanding it and figuring out, oh, actually that clicks in there. And I love that. That's what makes me excited about what I do, is that anything's possible. What you do day to day can be completely different. So I think embracing the fact that you don't know the path and that things are going to be challenging and there's going to be ups and downs. And Kane and I always say to each other that being a successful entrepreneur a lot of it is about not being too up on the ups and not too down on the downs, because you start to learn that they're inevitable. When things are good, it's easy to think they're always going to be good. And when things are bad, it feels like the world's ending. It's the truth is that neither of those things are true usually.
Well, it's been brilliant talking with you about how you started the agency, wrote the book, and now feed the book back into the agency. It's like a full circle, really. Before we finish, we always wrap up with some quick fire questions. So I hope that's okay. 4 questions from Hannah and me. First question: what's your favorite marketing campaign of all time that you didn't work on?
I'm gonna be topical, and pick a Christmas one, as we're sort of heading into that period. I'm a big fan of Cadbury's like postal posters that they did, where people can send a free bar of Cadbury's chocolate to people at Christmas. I think it aligns with everything I believe about marketing. They sent hundreds of thousands of chocolate bars, and it was a really selfless way of, they're getting awareness and building a positive connection with the brand, but they're also just doing good and making people's lives a little bit better.
One tool or app you can't live without?
I would say probably we use Productive as our sort of agency management tool for Giraffe, and I just couldn't retain everything in my head. Having something that tells me what I'm supposed to do each day, I think is, I just don't think I could survive without some sort of task management tool. When you wake up in the middle of the night thinking, oh my God, I've got to do this, you can just put it on there and forget about it and don't have to carry it around in your brain. So yeah, I'd probably say that.
What's the most underrated skill in marketing?
Listening.
And the biggest misconception about working in marketing?
The biggest misconception about working in marketing is that it's always fun and it's, creating things. And I think a lot of people come out of university focusing very much on the creative side of it and not as much on the communication side of it, especially in agency work when you're dealing with clients. And to be fair, even if you're working in brand, you're still going to have to work with a team, and that's going to involve pitching your ideas and taking feedback and collaborating on things. So yeah, I think maybe the biggest misconception is that it's all going to be just this creative endeavor. And actually there's a lot of communication and sort of people management and emotional intelligence that's needed to be successful in marketing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, that's been brilliant. So thank you very much for giving us your time. It's been a really fascinating conversation from lots of angles, thinking about the book and, entrepreneurs starting agencies. If people want to get in contact with you or follow you or find out more about the agency, what would you suggest that they do?
Sure. So the best place to find me personally is probably LinkedIn. The book is available on Amazon, and the website for our agency is giraffesocialmedia.co.uk.
Great. And just so people get it right, it's Phil Treagus-Evans.
Yeah, so double-barreled with my wife's family name.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for giving us your time. And look forward to seeing how the agency develops in the coming years.
Great. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Phil.